And I'm going to be nodding just because I'm not in this at all. So, you know, don't want to hear...
Are my feet showing?
No. Don't want to hear me talking because I'm not in it. So, okay. And then can you tell me how you got started in art and kind of how you got to where you are now?
Sure. When we left the refugee camps in Austria, we immigrated to Canada. And because I couldn't speak English, and I was 4 years old, the only two languages I could speak was my homeland language of Hungarian and some pretty broken up German from Austria. So, being unable to communicate with other children in the new country, I spent a lot of time just doodling, drawing, doing cartoons, doing a lot of pencil crayons and that. But it didn't take me long to pick up the language, and I never gave up the art. So through the years I progressed through every single medium. I excelled in school and then the famous artist schools. Set up my own design company and then took a career with Procter & Gamble, but during that whole 31-year career with Procter & Gamble, I maintained both my photography career and my watercolor career. So that was pretty much my life throughout the years. So and now, after I retired, I'm now a full-time photographer and artist. In 2011, I received an email from my wife-to-be, Nancy, who just sent me a single-line subject that said, Cowgirls. And the image that she included was these three cowgirls walking towards the camera, all carrying saddles. Well, it would take a lot of years after that I realized that it was that very single email that set the tone for the project that I would take on. So in 2012, about 8 months later, I wrote the business plan for the American Cowgirls Project, which went on to become known as Gabriel Krekk's American Cowgirls. And now I'm in the 8th year of the project. So on our website, www.americancowgirls.com, there's a page dedicated to cowgirls across America who are interested in the project, who want to submit an application for consideration. So there's a pretty intense process I go through in the selection before I ever interview them. So when I receive a submission from a cowgirl, I enter the name into the database, and there's a process I go through. I send a confirmation letter that I've received their request for consideration. I have a whole mathematical process that I go through to analyze the 8 areas that they respond to in their submission. So I just go in and look at how they rate, and I also request a Facebook friend request. And I do this because at the time that I'm doing their complete assessment, it's got 5 other areas that I look at. You know, I'll share this. Looking at their family, their backgrounds, and other things that are very important, because the values of the cowgirl have to be, it's not like profiling, but there has to be consistency on who they are. And I'm looking for strong, heavily value-based cowgirls. It usually takes me about a month to go through and do a complete assessment. It's a 3-page document. So by the whole time I'm done, I provide a 3-page document back to the cowgirl, and its rating, it was out of 100, but I removed the unique state of residence. Because when I had originally written the business plan, I wanted to cover as many states in the United States as possible. So I tried to keep it in the original business plan at maximum of 4 cowgirls per state. Now most of the cowgirls come from west of the Mississippi. So I've stepped over and, we've got one from Louisiana, Illinois, Missouri. But the majority of the submissions are coming from South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, quite a few from California. So I thought it was important at that time, but when I saw that my process was unfair, that high-scoring cowgirls weren't moving forward to interview, it didn't feel fair to me. So I eliminated that. And that number gets entered into the database, and when I'm ready to interview, I put a notice out that we're going into the interview process, and I'll re-examine the top 5 cowgirls. So I do a complete reassessment and ranking score to see what their life has turned into. And we've onboarded some of America's finest cowgirls. Like, I'm really, really proud of all of my cowgirls. I have Rylee Snyder, American Cowgirl 13, who is probably the most famous of the cowgirls. I did a joint venture with her on a children's book back in 2017. Her book, Walk, Ride, Rodeo. I had the honor of doing all the illustrations for her book, and that book went on to become the Netflix movie, Walk, Ride, Rodeo, and I'm really proud of her. So, anyways, from the complexity, I delayed because of COVID the onboarding of the last 2 cowgirls in the lineup, 24 and 25. So I pushed the interviews out to probably April, May of next year. So, and do the paintings after I complete the photo shoots. So phase 1 of the project will wrap up probably this time next year. It becomes quite a challenge. So once I get it down to 25, it's really intense, because I will spend 10 minutes viewing each image, not just looking at the picture that I took, but I look at improvement areas on the image. So once I get through the 4th level, when I have the last 25, I include the cowgirl in step 4 of this last phase. So typically that's down to 5 to 10 images. So I ask the cowgirl, what does this image mean to you? So they get to express, like when they look at the history of, if I used an old ranch that they grew up on as a girl and they were out riding the ranges, right? They get to share that with me. And then I get them to rate it. And it does have an impact on the final score. And I take it from there, and then I do the final rating. And from there, the high score goes onto the board.
So can you kind of tell me a little bit about your wife, Nancy, and how you met her and kind of that love story?
Sure. In August of 2004, I met my wife on Match.com, and we exchanged several emails, and then a few weeks later we actually got onto a voice call. And then I was living in Canada at the time. Nancy was American, living in upstate New York. On September 17th, 2004, she came up to Canada for the first time. She was an amazing woman. She was never afraid to ask questions. She was always on a learning curve, improving her life. She supported me in every way. She so believed in my work. That's why she was my biggest fan. And because of her, I'm the artist I am today. So our bond really grew. When she lost her HR role in upstate New York, we made the decision. I'd given her her first diamond, and that was in April of 2005. And I told her not to worry. We were going to start a life together. And she came up to Canada. I moved her up there, and it looked like we were going to start quite an amazing life. But unfortunately, she came up on September 1st of 2005. The visa was in process for the Canadian visa. And on September 12th, her aunt passed away in Madison, Wisconsin, Jackie. And Nancy decided to drive there. So she went for the funeral. And around September 24th, she returned, and she got denied access to Canada. This was a horrible event in our life. I mean, I scrambled with our members of Parliament. Nancy was turned around. She went back to Chicago, to where she was originally from. Her sister lived there. And for the next many years, we would go back and forth between Belleville, Ontario, and Chicago. So, yeah, fate had its way of, throwing a curve at us, but at the end of the day, we made it. So in 2009, actually I'm going to back it up, 2007, I had my sister, she married an American, and they had many properties across the Phoenix Valley, so I was coming down to sign with a gallery in LA for an exhibition for that September. And I stayed at their home here in, out Superstition Mountain, and I fell in love with Arizona. I stayed on for a few extra days, and I knew that I would buy a home down here someday as a winter vacation home. I never dreamed at that time that it would become my future home. So in 2009, I made the choice, found this home, and you can see why. This is an artist's home. I'm close to the Southwest Galleries in Scottsdale. It's a perfect headquarters to go out to my photo shoots on, so not too far from anything. So, but that was a real negative point with Nancy and I, because I fell in love with Arizona. She wanted upstate New York. I didn't want snow for the winter months. She loved the snow. So I had to make a unilateral choice, and I bought the home down here. And like I said, it's almost ironic that she would come to love Arizona. In 2015, my father passed away, and 6 weeks later, Nancy was diagnosed with breast cancer. So we had some tough life choices to make, and I chose to be with her. I have no regrets. I flew into Chicago, and I moved Nance down to my home here in Arizona, so I flew in, packed her up, and we were going to get her through this. And I stayed down here for almost 6 months, which is what the U.S. immigration allows. Actually, I had one extra week. So I got her through chemo, got her through the surgery to remove what was left of the mass. And thought we were going to have an amazing life. I mean, it was perfect. 6 months in Canada for the summer months, away from the Arizona heat. 6 months down here in the winter months. And in 2016, she had a MRI and a colonoscopy that came back perfect. And I had just wrapped up photo shoots in Louisiana, and Nancy called and asked me when I got bumped in to call her. I was heading back to Canada and feeling really great about life. And then Nance told me that the MRI showed that she had a small lesion on her liver. So they were going to do the biopsy. So I had a choice. Do I use up to 7 days, come back? Nancy said no, she could get through this. So how important the American Cowgirls Project was to her. She loved my cowgirls. She knew 2 of them personally. And it was American Cowgirl 2, Shell Abbott, that took my wife into the hospital. Or wife-to-be at this point. So Nancy almost died during the biopsy because she bled out. For whatever reason, the sac around the liver, she began to bleed out, and she had a huge hematoma. Because I was her power of attorney, the surgeon called me, and they had to administer a life-saving procedure. I was totally devastated. I mean, there I am, 2,000 miles away, 3,000 miles away. So I worked it back through the U.S. consulate to extend my time. When I crossed the border, went through Department of Homeland Security, a 2-hour interview with all the documentation so I could come back and, give my wife the care. And it was very apparent that Nancy was going to need long-term care. We were really optimistic from what her oncologist, Dr. Sean Froka, had to say, that we were going to get through this. We were going to do fine. So we decided that the best thing I could do for Nance was to pursue how I could possibly stay. Because when I passed through customs, across the border, they stamped my passport March 29th of 2017. I had to leave the country and I couldn't return until 2018. So, given that fact, I searched through the yellow pages to see what my legal options were. And that's when I came across Alicia Heflin's name. So I phoned her and set up an appointment, went and talked to her, and she laid out the options for me. And Nance was still in the hospital at this point, so I went, talked to Nance, and she said, for crying out loud, let's just get married. I looked at her and I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah, I'm serious. I said, okay, let's do it. So we did. I never made a big fuss about much, but Nancy and I we always loved August 16th. It was like our major anniversary. first day of connection. And then September 17th, we'd celebrate that as our first face-to-face. And October 26th is the day that we committed the rest of our lives to each other. Last year was really hard. But I find my peace up in the vault, my heart vault. So tomorrow, October 26th, I'll spend time in the vault in prayer, in thanks, gratitude. I'll talk her ear off. She always listens. She always did. And I'll continue to look at all the unopened cards. Because she knows what I write. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the cards?
So matter of fact, I'll let you take a look at them, just on the outside. So the cards to me are just a way for me to let her know that there will never be an important date that passes that I won't include her. So each card is representative of special occasions, anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, Easter, all of the, see the light, it's Nancy. All of those important dates that we would have shared had she still been with me. And we were, if you look at the vault, all of those cards that I collected over the years, she too collected every one. So.
And can you tell me a little bit more about the vault, like describe how it's set up and things like that?
Yeah. So, after Nancy passed, I had a really difficult time. There was just so much uncertainty, trying to understand this new reality that we, at least from my standpoint, I never expected. I really believed that we had a long life together, and we were going to live it. So, because her office was her place, I sat in there quite a few weeks after she passed. And I thought that I would convert her office into my personal memorial tribute to my wife. There's virtually not a square inch of wall space that doesn't reflect on our history together, all the precious moments, all the travels we ever did. You know, our most significant was the road trip in 2008 where we did like 14 states in 17 days and ended up back in Chicago for the 4th of July celebration. That was probably the most significant road trip she and I ever did. And last year when I did when I was hosted by the Folds of Honor as guest artist in Chicago, I took the small urn for Nancy's sister Barbie, and it had some of Nancy's ashes. And I retraced the steps, or the miles, from that 2008 road trip. So I took pictures, the Devil's Tower, Custer's last stand, right at the battlefield there. She loved the smell of sweetgrass. Right along the Little Bighorn River. I spent a lot of time there. So I made it to Chicago, and I took Nancy's ashes with me to this big event, and then I handed off the ashes to her sister. I brought closure to that part. So, anyways, so a lot of photographs upstairs reflect that 2008 road trip. I allow very few people in that room because it's so personal to me. Even Dakota, when he enters, he's got a level of respect. It's amazing to see. It's almost like a sacred monument, and I wouldn't want it to be any place else. So when I miss her, I just go upstairs. Did I answer that?
You're gonna make me cry. You guys had like a fairy tale love story.
My wife is also very spiritual, and she really set a path for my own Christianity, although we were different. She was more Hindu tradition, but the way we melded together, I learned so much to keep an open mind, to understanding of the human psyche and our belief system. So we are spiritual beings in the human experience. It's beautiful. And we never let it go. And I will never let it go. That's why I never take my hand off. No matter what God has in store for me. I just know who I am and what Nancy was to me and what I was to her. And I think that's what made our love so powerful. I'm not perfect. And our partnership for all those years in our marriage, it wasn't absolutely perfect. She loved me absolutely perfectly. And that's irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field.